passes, 320 yards in the air, and of course a bevy of wide receivers. Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy leading the way, each with touchdowns. Justin Watson as well. What'd you make of the win?
Pittsburgh's in trouble. I think that's what I took away from this game was that Kansas City was Kansas City. Pittsburgh's secondary, and this is now the fourth or fifth week in a row that this vaunted defense of Pittsburgh has gotten lit up and taken advantage of. So didn't matter very much that Pickens was back. I think Pittsburgh's in trouble moving forward. In fact, they got an interesting game next week. They could roll into the playoffs having lost, 4 straight games? Not a good situation in Pittsburgh.
Baltimore, this one was even uglier. Gifted a couple of points to the Texans courtesy of a Derrick Henry safety. It was 31-2. The Ravens won in Houston against the Texans. C.J. Stroud didn't make it all the way through this one. No injury, just sat him. Same story for Lamar Jackson. He didn't play toward the tail end of this thing. This was a rout from the very beginning, Joe. With that loss for Pittsburgh, Baltimore winning 11-5 atop the AFC North now. Houston, it was really, nothing to play for, ultimately. Pretty locked into that 4th seed and winning the AFC South. But Lamar Jackson, 168 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, had another score and 87 rushing yards. Derrick Henry, just a monster. 150, basically, on the ground. It was, those two guys like it always is for this team.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it if you're Baltimore. If you're Houston, everything I just said about Pittsburgh applies to you. You're in trouble. Wasn't a great spot, but this is a team that has no outside weapon threat. Mixon can't run the ball. The offensive line can't protect Stroud. And, boy, they looked like just a different defense out there against the Ravens. This, too, is a team that, they're going to have a rough sled here once the playoffs begin.
So those games, terrible. The NBA did not disappoint largely, though. You got some great games on the hardwood, including, of course, the Lakers' survival of Steph Curry and the Warriors at Golden State. That was after Anthony Davis left very early with an injury, didn't return. LeBron said, screw it, I'll do it myself. He was amazing. 31 and 10, those being 10 assists. So he was terrific. But Steph Curry, man, the guy that wouldn't go away, 38 points, 8 of 15 from 3 in the loss.
Yeah, well, Austin Reeves saves the day there with the game-winning bucket with 1 second left for the Lakers, who needed that win. But listen, LeBron and Christmas, we know what he's going to do. It was Steph Curry who has always struggled on Christmas, but not yesterday with 38 points. He single-handedly brought them back into that game late with a chance to win it, but they just couldn't stop Austin Reeves to the hoop. So they end up getting a much-needed win, the Lakers did.
Knicks, third best team in the Eastern Conference behind Cleveland and Boston, and eked out a win as well. It was a very back-and-forth, great matinee contest to start off the NBA day, improving to 20-10, 3-point win over the Spurs. Normally, Joe, when we're talking about the Knicks, it's Karl Anthony Towns, it's Jalen Brunson. How about Mikal Bridges? 41 points on 17 of 25 shooting, very efficient. And then Victor Wembanyama, get ready to see him play on Christmas a lot. 42 points, 18 rebounds.
Yeah, but I have no interest in seeing a 7'2" guy shoot 16 threes in a game. So this and that game right there is the problem with the NBA, which is why nobody watches it, which is why it's losing viewership. You can't have one of your best big men playing from 30 feet outside shooting 16 threes. Not something I'm interested in seeing at all, Adam.
Celtics, who of course are the defending champs, many believe they will win again. A rare loss last night at the hands of the Philadelphia 76ers. 11-17 for Philly right now. Boston drops to 22-8. I'll be a little bit of a Boston apologist here in this one because Philly, it did have its core. It did have its guys. Joel Embiid, 27 points, 9 rebounds, 31 minutes for him. Jason Tatum was solid, came on strong after a slow start. 32 points, 15 rebounds, but Kristaps Porzingis left early with an injury, only played 13 minutes. Drew Holiday, another member of that top 6 for Boston, did not play in this one, and so It really shortened the bench, obviously, a 4-point win for the Sixers.
But this is not a one-off situation for the Celtics. They have been downright terrible, especially at home this season here, mostly because they're inflated lines every game. And this yesterday was a prime example of how are they laying 9.5 to a Sixers team that has their big three. Only the sixth time those three have actually played together in a game this season. But the idea that thing was bet almost all the way up to 10, especially when Embiid twisted his ankle in warm-up, shooting a turnaround three for some reason. I have no idea why he was even practicing that shot. But he almost knocked himself out of the game. But great win for the Sixers. But there are some cracks in the armor here of this championship Celtics team. But it is a long season here after all.
Mavericks had to survive the Timberwolves. Kyrie Irving has a history of torching Minnesota to just that, went for nearly 40 points. But the story of the game is not Minnesota winning by 6. It's that Dallas is bracing itself for missing Luka Doncic for an extended period of time with a calf strain. What'd you make of it?
I mean, 40 points in the first half is what Dallas had. Luka had 16 of them and left with about 7 minutes to go in the first half. This game was won by Minnesota in the first half. They held on in the second half, but it was close.
And the only other game, of course, was Phoenix taking care of business against Denver. A lot of people had the Nuggets in that one, but Suns prevailed. Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, they were solid. Jokic, you can't beat everybody. We'll be back here on the early line on SportsGrid.
So my team didn't win this weekend, but I still did with this app that's taking over the game. Sports Millions Pick'em lets you make quick and easy predictions. Pick your favorite players, go higher or lower, and you can still win big even if your team loses. Plus, the multiplier is insane. With just a few picks, you can win big money. So get on it. They've got a welcome bonus to help you start off your winning streak.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets and when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Back here on the early line, Adam with Joe. We're hanging out talking about all things busy Christmas Day slate in the NFL, NBA, all of it. Let's circle back to the NFL, Joe, because again, day started off with the Chiefs taking care of Pittsburgh with relative ease. It did sort of contribute to crowding up the middle of the pack in terms of the AFC playoff standings right now. You have Kansas City clinching that number one overall seed at 15-1 now, opening up a 3-game advantage on Buffalo. Of course, the Bills will play later this week. You have the Bills, the Ravens, the Texans. So those two, Ravens, Texans, also in action yesterday, and then the Steelers. So 4 of the top 5 in the AFC all playing yesterday. And I think in large part, and you alluded to this, sort of reminding people the teams that won, who the bleep they are, right? Like who can actually make it to the Super Bowl, who is a true contender in the NFL, in the AFC specifically. I just don't think Pittsburgh, for all the Mike Tomlin love and all the Tomlin as an underdog against the spread numbers and everything, the Steelers, especially led by this version of Russell Wilson, not that he hasn't been better than I expected him to be, they're just not there. They're not on that level of Kansas City, of Buffalo, of Baltimore. And so Steelers, despite how many people were on Pittsburgh, +3, +2.5 yesterday, that was maybe a bit of a wake-up call for Kansas City and Pittsburgh.
Well, I mean, listen, Kansas City still has not scored 30 points in a game this year, which is hilarious. Although they came awfully close on the road in Pittsburgh, and almost did it here against a very suspect defense there for Pittsburgh. And it really has to do with their secondary. No Joey Porter Jr. yesterday. He was ruled out late. We know that has been the weakest part of their defense this year, but the youth there, the lack of depth, they're getting torched. I mean, how many times did we have to watch Travis Kelce wide open in the middle of the field with nobody covering him? And that is why Mahomes had himself quite the day that he had. 320 yards, 29 to 38.
Yep.
And the fact that Chris Jones was ruled out before the game started on the Chiefs' defensive line, and they still sacked Russell Wilson 5 times. That's an offensive line issue as well now for the Pittsburgh Steelers that has to be addressed. They had only had 4 sacks without Chris Jones on the field this year. They had 5 in this game without him. That's a big problem for Pittsburgh.
The 30 points thing is wild, too. I don't know how many people realized this going into yesterday or coming out of yesterday, because they flashed on Netflix. Credit them for this. They flashed the graphic up on the screen. I don't know if you saw this. So the teams to fail to score 30 points in every game so far this year, it's actually a very short list. You have the Giants, who are 2-13, the Raiders, who are 3-12, the Patriots, who are 3-12, and then the 14 and now 15-1 Kansas City Chiefs. Like, it's, like which one doesn't belong, right? It's pretty incredible. And look, we've been praising this Kansas City defense and kind of questioning aspects of the offense for a couple of years now. But how much of that do you think is just regular season Kansas City, and then like last year, despite being a dog in every single postseason game and winning all of them with Patrick Mahomes, who is just an absolute freak of nature when it comes to, being an underdog, as we know, one career loss. How much of it is just flip the switch and get the job done when it matters most?
Well, they're not the Kansas City team of old when they had, Tyreek Hill and company there where they could just stretch teams out. They are built and seemed from very early on in the season willing to be, hey, as long as it's a 1-score game in the fourth quarter, even if we're losing, we're more than happy to play in those kinds of games because we have the ability, the experience, the players to go out there and win the game and make sure that the other team can't come back. And that is what they have done to a 15-1 record this year, unlike anything we have ever seen. They are a great first-half team, an awful second-half team, and mostly because they basically, their idea is, listen, we're not going to blow anybody out, so we have to play in these close games, but we have to make it so we have a lead early, and then we put ourselves in a position late in order to be able to come back and win these games. and they've done it time and time again. And this is one of the only of a handful of games in which it really didn't matter in the second half. They basically put the game away because Pittsburgh couldn't get out of their own way.
My takeaways in terms of this Kansas City offense watching this thing yesterday were mainly based around kind of how is this structured. Like, we know there's at this stage of his career, 35 years old, there's a little boomer bust to Travis Kelce's game. He'll be there in the postseason, but it feels like throughout a large part of the regular season, he's kind of bubble wrapped and all that. But like you said, was a force yesterday, 8 of 11, had 84 yards. But Worthy has kind of, I don't want to say he's Tyreek Hill, but he's kind of become this team's number one pass catching option, even though he only had the 9 targets yesterday, but he went 8 of 9 for 79. And then after that, it's sort of sprinkled around, right? Like it feels like with Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown healthy now, DeAndre Hopkins has taken a back seat. He's a little bit less of a focal point, only had 4 targets yesterday. We know who and what Juju Smith-Schuster is at this stage. And this team, I don't think yesterday was that big of an outlier. I feel like we've been seeing this in recent weeks. The run game is just inconsistent and unpredictable. I mean, he had 69 total rushing yards out of this team, Joe, and a combined 38 from Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco.
The short passing game is their running game. We saw Brady do this for how many years with the New England Patriots? They didn't have great running backs, didn't need a great running game. You needed it when it mattered, and Kareem Hunt, of course, punches it in from inside the red zone, and that is when it matters to them most. But quite honestly, they're protecting him. He's not under any sort of crazy duress, and now defense has got to worry about Hollywood Brown stretching the field. And that's this is when this team and Patrick and Kelce all of a sudden ends up wide open in the middle of the field because you're so worried about the other weapons. And that's what Kansas City is now.
The Chiefs are now co-favorites on FanDuel to win the Super Bowl with the Detroit Lions. And then you have Buffalo, Philadelphia, and Baltimore to round out the top 5. Let's talk more about that Ravens win. Maybe look at some MVP odds when we come on back here on the Early Line.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
Like, they may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover. So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
Yeah, this is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid. In the heart of winter, when nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose. Fans bound by passion. Each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
Chiefs again blew out the Steelers yesterday, locked up the top overall seed in the AFC, home field advantage throughout the conference playoffs. Obviously, 15-1 right now. One game left in the regular season, and that is against the Denver Broncos. It is next week, of course, week 18. It is on the road at Mile High, a game that we don't have the exact timing of it yet because of the flex situation, but really, that's about as meaningless as the game itself, Joe. And, whether or not you're going to even see Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and some of these guys play in this game. There was an argument for resting Kelce or pardon me, Mahomes last week, this game against the Texans, just because, all right, short week, how does Mahomes look? Do we need to be worried about this high ankle sprain? Goes out there and he's just fine. And throw out all the Monday morning quarterbacking, second guessing any of it, all of it irrelevant. He was awesome again yesterday. And now you could sit him at this point in week 18 and give him 2.5 weeks off before he has to play in the playoffs. And he's not someone I worry about rust. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to carry himself. He's had enough of these deep playoff runs. Is that what Santa Andy Reid's gift to Patrick Mahomes and some of these guys is going to be? After this celebration in week 17, you can just sit back and chill for a little bit here?
Well, you're assuming that they're going to chill next week and not play anybody, but who the hell knows these days with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes never wants to sit in any situation here.
Sure.
But what they assured themselves of is that, well, quite honestly, it's going through Arrowhead again. The AFC, once again, going through Arrowhead. So that puts the Baltimore Ravens, that puts the Buffalo Bills, everybody on notice here that you are at some point going to have to go and beat a Kansas City team again if you want to get to the Super Bowl, and you're going to have to do it in Arrowhead, one of the toughest places to play in all of the NFL. So, listen, they got a lot of breaks along the way, but it feels like they weathered the storm with the injuries to skill position guys early, and now here they sit. And it should be mentioned, too, huge effort by the rookie Worthy in that game as well, who had been kind of disappointing so far this year. But Mahomes is apparently not afraid to throw him the ball, get him the ball in games, and that's a good sign there, because with Worthy speed and Hollywood Brown speed, this is a different offense now heading into the playoffs. And, of course, Brown hasn't played, so he's a lot healthier than everybody else at this point.
I'll push back just a little bit on Worthy being disappointed. I mean, he's a rookie, Joe. He's a rookie. Like, how much could we expect
but
from
he was
him
the
really
only option
in the opening half of the season?
Everybody else was hurt.
He was, but I just don't think Mahomes was going to force feed him and necessarily put him into that situation. Obviously, Rashee Rice, if he had stayed healthy, he would be the clear number one, and Worthy would be taking that much more of a backseat. We all understand that. But in recent weeks here, again, 8 for 9 for 79 yesterday, and that was a career day out of him. I'm a little surprised by that. I figured there would have been an 80 or 90 yard game in here at some point. But to your point, the yards overall, he's below 700 for the season, but 7 of 11 for 65 2 weeks ago, 6 of 11 for 46 a few weeks back, touchdowns now in consecutive games. I just think the bigger thing with Worthy is, no, he doesn't have the huge gains, the yards after catch, all that stuff. We're still waiting for some of those explosive plays, which are bound to happen at some point during the playoffs. But the target volume, man, 29 targets in the last 3 games.
A ton. And that means they're ramping up, which is scary to everybody that is going to have to play them at this particular point, because they spent, 15 weeks of the NFL season looking like one thing, and now they've spent the last couple of weeks getting healthy and looking like a completely different offense. So, yeah, teams are going to have their hands full with Kansas City for sure.
Now, Pittsburgh down the odds board in terms of its Super Bowl, realistic odds, I guess. I mean, 40-1, which is tied with Houston, Washington, the Chargers, just in front of teams like the Bucks, Broncos. Can we believe? I know what Mike Tomlin has done with this team, and it's certainly exceeded most people's expectations, but does it feel real come the playoffs, you think?
No, it doesn't. I don't think you can flip a switch with this team. I don't think that's possible. I mean, this was the third game in a row, and everybody knows what Pittsburgh is under Tomlin as an underdog. It's the third loss in a row as an underdog. It's not going to get better from here.
With Joe Raineri, Adam Kaufman, much more on the NFL and yesterday's events across the league. We'll talk some NBA, a whole lot of it coming your way on the early line.
In the heart of winter, when nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose. Fans, bound by passion. Each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred, or just worked on the side, or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this, I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text, put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. When he texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Ravens absolutely dismantled the Texans yesterday, a game that was really never a game. 31-2 in Houston, just the safety when Derrick Henry, who was a monster in the contest, tackled obviously in the end zone and not when he scored the touchdown. I'm talking earlier, leading to those Texans points. That was it. That was the high moment for Houston in that game. Again, I mean, just a performance that really orchestrated who we are versus who you are out of the Baltimore Ravens, improving to 11-5, a game in front of the Pittsburgh Steelers in the AFC North with one game to go. Lamar, 168 passing, 87 rushing, 3 total touchdowns. Henry, 147 on the ground, had a touchdown as well. Good day for me, Joe. I mean, it could have been an unbelievable day. It could, like Nico Collins, if he hadn't, come up short for me, could have paid for Christmas yesterday. But nevertheless, it was a solid day out of the Ravens, a fraudulent day out of the Texans, and if ever there were a good time for a game to happen opposite Christmas dinner, it was this one.
I mean, this game was quite over before it really even started. I mean, after the first quarter, the Ravens had 115 rushing yards and Houston had 8. And that is pretty much what happened the rest of the way through there, with the Ravens finishing with 228 rushing yards. The Texans had 45. 2 points on a safety that I'm still trying to figure out what that play call was. That you're somehow going to pitch it out to Derrick Henry instead of having him go north and south. You're having him go east and west, which was interesting on the goal line. But kudos to the defender, the rookie that made the tackle in the end zone. But that was the highlight of the Texans' day. I mean, 31-2. And this is a Houston team playing at home that we're supposed to take seriously moving forward. I can't. I mean, there was levels to this, and what we saw from Baltimore, Houston's not even remotely close here. So much like Pittsburgh, I think Houston is in big trouble moving forward. Doesn't make a difference what they do next week, obviously, because they've already qualified for the playoffs. But and then what? There's no help on the way here with this Houston team, and I think that's the problem here. They've lost all the guys that mattered to them. The offensive line was suspect at best, and they're no longer flying under the radar. They're now the hunted, Adam, which makes this a totally different year than last year where nobody saw them coming. Now everyone's looking for them, and that is a totally different feeling. And obviously 31-2 later, now they understand what it feels like to be the hunted.
Yeah, and it has been a step backward for C.J. Stroud this year. Not nearly as impressive in more years as rookie year. And part of that, the injuries around him in that offense. I understand Nico Collins missed a decent amount of time. He's back. Generally speaking, looked solid yesterday, notwithstanding. But obviously, you lose Tank Dell. And in terms of just being a threat to take some attention away from Nico Collins, that's a big deal. And, as we know, he's having surgery. He's done. He's not coming back. And so this Texans team, sort of like the conversation we had in the previous segment with the Chiefs and the Steelers. I mean, these teams they're both going to finish out the year with wins in all likelihood. I mean, the Ravens have the Browns, the Texans have the Titans. Like, these are not going to be challenging games, even if guys are resting. But as far as Houston, I mean, what's even the approach to this one? Are you trying to sort of work through some stuff and shore some things up and end the regular season with a vote of confidence, or are you going in trying to stay as healthy as possible going into the playoffs, knowing that obviously there is nothing to play for? You've locked up the AFC South.
Well, I mean, they'll have at least some extended rest here, and they finished the season against the Jags, so they should get to 10 wins and at least head into the playoffs on a winning note. Should. Now, whether or not they play anybody, I don't know, but I think having that extra rest will give them the ability to get the starters back on the same page and feeling good. So a little extra time to prepare for a Jags team, quite honestly, that they should have no problem beating. They've had no problem. The reason they're even in this spot here, Adam, is because they ended up starting the season beating a lot of the less than 500 teams, the bottom feeders. They are better than them, but they are not better than the Baltimore and Kansas Cities of the world, obviously. So they should get that win, get the 10 on the season, and then, of course, good luck in the playoffs because they're going to need it.
Lamar Jackson, like I said, was tremendous yesterday, and entered yesterday. Looking at FanDuel, he had entered yesterday in terms of the MVP odds. It was really it's always Lamar Jackson and it's Josh Allen, right? It was Josh Allen minus 450 and Lamar at plus 380, and this is tightening at this point. Now Allen is minus 280, Lamar is plus 200. But here's the thing, and I've gotten some flack about this, I suppose, but to me, Lamar Jackson is not even the MVP of his own team. To me, that is Derrick Henry. It's been Derrick Henry all season long. And I think that even if you disagree with that, I think it only further supports Josh Allen's case, because he doesn't have a Derrick Henry. He doesn't have anything close to a Derrick Henry on that team. I mean, he's largely done this by himself. And also, some of the wins are more impressive. Obviously, the only team to hand the Chiefs a loss. I just think they've played a tougher, more daunting schedule and have, obviously run away with a bad division, but have contended until now for the overall, the one seed, the top overall seed in the AFC. The Ravens, they're a good team, don't get me wrong. And if they go on a nice deep playoff run, even win a Super Bowl, I'm not going to sit here and be shocked by that. But Lamar is not doing it by himself. He is not the MVP of the league. Not this year. He's been there before. Not this year.
Well, you make a great point. He's not the MVP of his own team as far as I'm concerned. A 30-year-old running back that is going to finish, with 200 yards short of 2,000, which has never been done with anybody even close to 30 years old at the running back spot. I mean, but the year that Derrick Henry and Saquon are having, only Saquon is younger, is unbelievable. Without Derrick Henry, this Ravens team and Lamar Jackson are not having the kind that they are. So that's a good point. But also this narrative switches every time we see one of the two guys play. Lamar, every time we see Lamar play, oh my God, he's the MVP. Now we're going to see Josh Allen play this week against the Jets. We're going to be like, oh my God, just give him the MVP. It just switches every time these two guys play. So let's just all settle down. They've been wanting to give Josh Allen this award for the last couple of years. They have a reason to give it to him this year. I'm pretty sure Josh Allen is walking away with the MVP. No matter what happens in the playoffs.
Well, and as someone with a preseason ticket on Josh Allen at plus, I think it was 750, 800, something like that to win MVP. I'd like to see that thing come home, Joe. But, you know, you mentioned obviously with what Derrick Henry is doing as a 30-year-old running back. Again, even yesterday, this blowout win, this 31-2 win for the Baltimore Ravens early on when Baltimore jumped out to the 10-0 lead, like instantly. Who was the tone setter? Who was the guy that was sort of leading the way? Lamar was, you know, had some positive gains and he was fine, you know, or like it wasn't until much later that he had that like 50-yard touchdown run and that big bomb to Mark Andrews and all that. Derrick Henry had 70-some rushing yards in the first quarter. The first quarter. He was a freight train. You couldn't stop him.
147 yards and didn't even play at the end there, I think. 27 attempts. I mean, what more do you want this guy to do here? The guy has been absolutely a wrecking ball. And a lot of people thought at 30 years old, by the way, when he left Tennessee, that this was just, oh, my God, what are the Ravens doing? What the Ravens are doing is making a run at a Super Bowl with a 30-year-old running back that everyone else stuck a fork in. Far from over yet for Derrick Henry.
Could be a long playoff run, obviously. How close are the Ravens to the Chiefs? That's what I think a lot of people are wondering. And let's not exclude the Buffalo Bills. They're part of that conversation. We will explore when we come on back here on the Early Line. This is SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Chiefs with a blowout win yesterday. The Ravens, it was a hold my beer situation, an even bigger blowout win yesterday. And so let us take a early look, I guess, a current look at the AFC playoff picture as things stand right now, with a whole bunch more games still to go in Week 17. So here's what we have, obviously. The Chiefs are at the top, as expected, 15-1, have locked up the number 1 overall seed, 4th time in 7 years. The Bills at 12-3, they were in contention for a little bit there. The Ravens, who in all likelihood are going to win the AFC North, 11-5. Then you have the Texans, 9-7. Those are your division leaders, ultimate division winners, likely across the board. And then the Steelers at 10-6, who have locked up a playoff seed, despite what you saw yesterday. From there, you have two teams that in all likelihood are going to get in. The Chargers and Broncos each sitting, Joe, at 9-6. And then mathematically still in the picture, at least right now, the Colts, the Dolphins, the Bengals. Now, I'd love to see Cincinnati make it. That's a conversation for another time. I'm just not sure the Broncos or Chargers are going to fall off enough to make that happen. Need Cincinnati to win out and some help. But at the top of the conference, people want to talk about really those top three teams. It's the Chiefs, it's the Bills, it's the Ravens. We saw two of them play yesterday, two of them win emphatically. How close are the hopefuls, the Ravens, the Bills, to the team that has won the last two Super Bowls from Kansas City?
Well, listen, they all know each other pretty well, don't they? That 1, 2, and 3 seed there. And until they beat Kansas City in a meaningful game in January and can actually get past them, then the narrative remains the same. They're not in the same league. And they're not in the same league because neither the Bills nor the Ravens can ever beat the Chiefs. And it doesn't make a difference if it's in Orchard Park or if it's in Baltimore. History tells us that there's levels to this, and the Bills and Ravens, as good as they have been, they're not what the Chiefs are. The Chiefs are a cut above. Look at Holmes, look at Reed. You can look to 1,000,001 different reasons as to why that is, but the reality is until the Ravens or the Bills beat the Chiefs in a game that matters in January, then the narrative remains the same. There's the Chiefs and there's everybody else here, Adam.
Thought they would last year. Bet on them too. Nope. Didn't work
Everybody
out.
did.
Don't bet against Patrick Mahomes
in
as
Baltimore.
an underdog. You just don't do it. Right. But the thing that here's the thing about that game, thinking back to it. And people, you mentioned Brady before. People did this for, 20 years playing against Bill Belichick and Tom Brady and the Patriots. It was, you make mistakes. You sort of fumble the bag in the moment. You defecate yourself. You get scared of the situation because of who is on the other side. We saw that with the Ravens last year. It wasn't that the Chiefs were dramatically better. It was that the Ravens completely abandoned their game plan. They overthought it. Rather than going with their strength, which was running the football, even pre-Derrick Henry, it was running the football. And they branched away. They made it a passing game. That was no way for Baltimore. Forget playing against Kansas City and what the Chiefs were good or bad at defensively. It was just no way for Baltimore to win a game, to play a game its way, run clock, all of that. Do you think there was a lesson learned there for the Ravens and for Harbaugh to, where you can go into Kansas City this time around if that ends up coming into picture and just, I don't know, having a better head on your shoulders?
I still think the Ravens and the Bills, to your point, have all the talent in the world enough to be able to beat this team, right? And it's going to come down to which team can make the plays when it matters the most in the fourth quarter. And to this point, and to their credit, it's been Andy Reid out coaching and Patrick Mahomes outperforming the superstars and coach on the other sideline. That has not changed. Nothing we've seen from the Chiefs leads me to believe that all of a sudden, now, they're ripe to be getting caught. No, they're not. They're even better now because of the way they have gone 15-1. Adam, here, they're not blowing teams out. They don't cover games. They just make it so we play close enough, and we know when there's 2 minutes left and we have the ball, we're beating you. That's it. Or if you have the ball with 2 minutes left with a chance to beat us, you're not doing it because our defense is setting up. That may be the most impressive thing about Kansas City that nobody's talking about is what Spags has done with this defense this year, not to mention last year, but they won it last year. But this defense this year, to lose a guy like Chris Jones in that game yesterday and still get 5 sacks on a Pittsburgh team on the road in Pittsburgh, it's not enough credit being given, I think, to the defense in Kansas City. And I think that is the scariest part of this team right now, which is why they've been able to rattle off a 15-1 record without scoring at least 30 points in any game.
We've been talking down the Texans, rightfully so, after what we saw yesterday and what we expected yesterday. I mean, nobody was on Houston. I didn't see anyone on Houston to win that game, to cover the spread. It was all just Ravens.
Over,
I mean, not
money.
a good day for the books when it cut. Yeah, that as well. So that said, Houston is 9-7. We talked about this before. C.J. Stroud, I think, has regressed a little bit here in his sophomore year. This team has, 13-1 odds to win the AFC, 40 to win 40-1 to win the Super Bowl. I don't know that this team can even win a playoff game, Joe. What do you suppose has gone wrong with Stroud this year compared to last year when everyone wanted to kind of anoint him as the next guy?
Yep. Well, I mean, listen, losing Tank Dell and they didn't have Tank Dell in that playoff game against Baltimore last year, and it was a bloodbath. So nothing has really changed. But I do think this idea that nobody gave them, and flying under the radar last year and surprising everybody versus everybody is cunning after you, Texans, especially the better teams, will not take you lightly. Your offensive line got worse. Your skill position weapons got worse, and you can't run the ball. That's a recipe for disaster. Now, defensively, they can't stop any of the better offenses. That's not good for the Texans.
Most would agree, sounds like Joe and I do, that the AFC is pretty top-heavy. You could argue the NFL is pretty top-heavy for that matter, but just how top-heavy? Should we give any love to some of the playoff hopefuls here when the playoffs begin? We'll get into it. Look at the odds board on the other side here on the early line.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
So as we've been talking about extensively, dominating wins for both the Chiefs and Ravens yesterday, two teams atop the AFC, plus the Bills sandwiched in between. But some of these other teams, let's show you what the playoff picture in the AFC looks like once more. Some of the teams, once you get after those division winners or projected division winners, you have the Steelers, who we've been talking about some, obviously, Chargers, Broncos, who have yet to clinch, in all likelihood will, Colts, Dolphins, Bengals on the outside looking in here, Joe. In terms of value, and we don't even need to necessarily look at Super Bowl value, just, value to win the AFC, win the conference, forget, getting all the way to the dance and taking care of business there. I mean, it's a huge drop-off, right? You get the Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, all inside 4-1, and then it balloons. Texans, 13-1. Chargers, 15-1. Steelers, 17-1. Again, Chargers haven't even clinched yet, have better odds than the Steelers. Broncos, 22-1. I would like to talk myself into the Bengals at 90-1, to be perfectly honest with you, but I'm just not sure the path to get in is realistic enough to light the money on fire. And then Dolphins, Colts, we don't really need to go there. So, I mean, where is there value that is worth investing in here in this conference, or does it not exist?
Yeah, well, the Bills are the Ravens right now. That's it. Because the numbers ain't going to get better than that right now if you're not already holding a ticket. Listen, we already know the Texans and the Steelers. That's two out of the three teams here that we know are making or out of the next, the Texans won their division, so they're in regardless, right? But let's just put an X through them. Let's put an X through the Steelers. Do I think the Broncos may not even make the playoffs, if we're being honest here? They're not beating the Bengals this week. They will get a break with maybe a Chiefs team next week that wants absolutely nothing to do with playing Mahomes and company. But are we really just handing the Broncos a win there? I don't think so. So the Broncos, they still control their destiny. But they may, with a rookie quarterback, not have what it takes in order to get there, which would open the door for a team, like you said, Cincinnati, which is going to be very dangerous, because I would equate Cincinnati to what Detroit is right now, a team that can drop 40 points on anybody, but they may give up 30 as well, and that's kind of what we're dealing with. But they still have an opportunity. I don't see Burrow and company faltering down the stretch. The question is, they're going to need Denver to lose out here. They'll handle Broncos this week, and then they got to hope the Chiefs, for some reason, want to win that game to go 16-1 in the regular season. And the Chargers, I think, are the wild card. I will take Herbert anytime at 15-1 against just about anybody except maybe the Kansas City Chiefs. But the Chargers are, to me, the sleeper of any of these teams in the AFC, and it's because of Herbert, it's because of Harbaugh, it's because of the coaching, which matters in a one-game situation. Why not the Chargers at 15-1 if you're looking for a long shot?
At that point, it's me talking myself into Harbaugh and what he's been able to accomplish as both an NFL and obviously college coach, more than it is that team. I mean, I like Herbert. I love Ladd McConkey, though he's a rookie. But, and the defense. Defense has done a solid job throughout the year, holding teams off the board. But, yeah, I mean, they could use him, obviously. That run game's been awfully inconsistent without him. Hell, inconsistent with him. But more so, obviously, with to your point, though, I can't get beyond that top three. Not to where I want to invest in it. I mean, you want to root for it as a fan, just root for chaos. That's one thing. But I'm not even sure. Not that I wouldn't be shocked, obviously. I mean, how can you say in the wake of what we saw yesterday, you'd be shocked if the Ravens make it to the Super Bowl? I wouldn't. Still, I feel like it's the Bills. I feel like the Bills are the team that ultimately is going to get there, and it's the one that I'm rooting for. I would like to see Josh Allen and that team on that stage, especially coming into the year when there were so many people, myself included, that were skeptical of what this Bills offense was going to look like with virtually nothing around Allen.
It's so top heavy. It's kind of hilarious here, but I do think that you still have, I think the seeding is going to matter. We know Kansas City is going to have the bye, right? So I do think that seeding with the, 5, 6, 7 I think that's going to matter this year on who gets who when, because styles make fights, and there's some interesting ones that may take place there in the opening round.
More NFL still to come here on the early line. Hang with us for your early morning. Go grab some coffee, settle in. Let's maybe talk about how to cash some bets a little bit later on as well. There are games today, you know.
I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a chance. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred, or just worked on the side, or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
The NFL and college, they don't operate on the same timelines, right? UNLV's head coach just got, the Purdue job this morning, where I imagine, right, UNC probably needs to know from Bill.
And let's say it's late December, and we see 7, 8 teams open, and none of them want Bill. Then Bill's got to make a decision. Does he want to be a college head coach?
Pro football today, only on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
One hour down, 2 to go here on the early line on SportsGrid. In for Ben Stevens, I am Adam Kaufman, joined by Joe Raineri, a regular here on this program. Thank you for watching. Of course, if you are across SportsGrid TV, the bevy of ways that you can consume this program, SportsGrid Radio, Sirius XM, Channel 159, social media, however you are finding us, we are sure glad here on this morning after Christmas that you have, and talking a lot about what went on in the NFL yesterday. It was, kind of boring, unless, of course, you're on the right side with your bet slips, invested in the Chiefs, invested in the Ravens, invested in certain player props, Derrick Henry among others, and we'll do a whole lot more in the NBA on the way as well. We're still taking a look at some Super Bowl odds and, really trying to examine what this is going to look like, Joe, and who can compete, and does it deserve to be as top heavy as obviously the odds board is, all of it. We've been talking about which teams present value in the AFC, who could, in theory, challenge Kansas City, and we've agreed, as most people would, that it's, like some of these other teams, they're cute. They're in the dance. Good for you. But really, in terms of making a run, it's KC, it's Buffalo, it's Baltimore. All that said, we've been talking about strengths and weaknesses of the two teams that have not won back-to-back Super Bowls. How about the Chiefs? I mean, 3 in a row, man, doesn't happen. It's unprecedented. Do we believe that, led by Andy Reid with Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce at his advanced football age, and these guys that are emerging here late in the season, Xavier Worthy among them, and Brown now available, Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, and what he can do. Hell, Juju Smith-Schuster will have a big catch from time to time. Is Kansas City going to do this again? Like, do we realistically believe the Chiefs are going to, Jordan this thing in three-peat?
Listen, if you ask anybody